Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my August wrap-up as well as my Magical Readathon NEWTS edition wrap-up. August was the Magical Readathon, so for the NEWTS this year I was attempting to become an herbologist. Did I succeed or fail? We will see. And this video is being sponsored by Caravan, which I will talk about later at the end of the video. So the first book that I finished this month was The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin, which is the first book in the Dream Blood duology. This was my Patreon VIP pick, which is a name that I don't love, but I haven't thought of something different for it. Basically, I pick from my Patreon supporters in a raffle, and someone gets to choose any book off my TBR for me to read. This is in addition to the monthly polls that I do that everyone gets to participate in, but one person gets the ultimate power. So Joey, one of my Patreon supporters, picked this book and we ended up sort of buddy reading it together. I've done a full review on this book, so I'll link that on the screen, but this is an adult fantasy series that really focuses on a magic system in which Dream Blood, obviously, is a major component, and there's a lot of political upheaval happening, and there's 3 different POVs, and I go into much more detail, obviously, in my review. I liked this, but not as much as the Broken Earth series, which is the first series that I read by her. This is still intriguing, and I'm excited to get to the second book because it's more of a companion novel. It takes place later and follows different characters, apparently. So I really liked this. It is the very typical N.K. Jemisin. You get kind of dumped into the world a bit. She has really interesting magic systems, and almost always all of her characters are people of color, and the folklore and the mythology is based more on different cultures that are not Western, so it's a very fun and interesting twist on the typical fantasy that we always tend to get that's based very much on like medieval times and things like that. So I ended up enjoying this, but it did take me a little bit to get into because I didn't love the characters as immediately as I did in the Broken Earth series, so I gave this 3.25 to 3.5 stars. This ended up being an A in arithmancy, which is a class I didn't need for herbology, but at the beginning of the month I was thinking that maybe I could kind of get 2 classes done, potions and herbology, and do like a really cool twist. That did not happen, spoiler alert. So I didn't end up needing this anyway, but this was a book that I wanted to read in August regardless, and that was the plan, so I wanted to get to this even though it didn't really fit in with my NEWTS. I then read The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This was for an A in Care of Magical Creatures, so I passed that part of my NEWTS. I just did a full review on this, so I will link that on the screen. This is the first book in the second era of the Mistborn series, the first series being the original Mistborn series, and this is a really fun romp. It's more of like a Wild West. It takes place hundreds of years after the first series and is just a lot more sort of fun and less serious than the first series, but you definitely have to read the first series to get to this series, otherwise you're not going to care about pretty much anything that's going on. But it was really fun to be back in this world. I enjoy these characters and I'm excited to see kind of where these characters go, because right now it sort of does feel like a more fun romp, but I think it'll get more serious as it goes on. But I'm excited to see how this world has changed, how the magic has changed, and how some things probably have stayed the same as well. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. I was excited to get back into some Sanderson adult fantasy because I feel like it's been a while since I've read any of his Cosmere books. Then for an A in herbology, I read The River of No Return by B. Ridgway. This is a book that's been on my TBR for forever and was actually on my first part of the year TBR for books that I wanted to get right within the first part of the year. Obviously didn't do that, but I've caught up. I've caught up now. So this I listened to an audiobook, and I did enjoy the audiobook. This is taking place in a couple of different timelines. It follows 2 different characters, one of which is a soldier who, during the Napoleonic Wars, was time traveled to present day. I mean, I think it's 2013 at the time, and gets intercepted by this time-traveling organization, and he's told that he can't go back. And then the other POV is a woman that he actually knows from the past, and she is kind of dealing with the current things happening in the past, and how her grandfather was a time traveler as well, and kind of their paths intersecting and things through time. So a lot of just time stuff. This felt less fantasy and more historical fiction, definitely. The time travel part of it is obviously a major part, but it feels more rooted in reality in a more historical fiction type way than in a more fantastical or even sci-fi way. So that was kind of unexpected. I also didn't know when reading this that this was not a standalone. This is actually part of a duology, I believe, and I wasn't intrigued enough with it to continue. I'm fine with it just being how it was here, but there were some things that obviously weren't wrapped up, so I was disappointed. Is that really the book's fault? No, because it is a series, but I just thought that I was going to get more of a satisfying conclusion, and I found that I didn't quite care about some of the different side characters and some of the intrigue that was going on, and I think this is definitely a book and a series that you really have to be more attached to the characters than I was, because it's a lot more character focused. I didn't dislike the characters by any means, but I just wasn't like super invested in some of what was going on, and I don't really care about what happens kind of going forward. This was enough of a conclusion for me, although it wasn't super satisfying. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I then read Reincarnate Blues by Michael Poore, which was for an A in potions, and I did need to get an E, which is the very last level, so I didn't make it all the way through my potions exams. This follows the main character of Milo, and he is a man that has lived thousands and thousands of lives, and he's reincarnated every time, and everyone's reincarnated, and he is actually in love with death. So there's a lot of things about this story that I was really drawn to as far as reincarnation, connections to death. You have time spent kind of in the underworld or the in-between before reincarnations, things like that. This was definitely fun, but also at times a little bit disturbing. There's a lot of things in here that were a little bit more heavy hitting than I was expecting. I am going to be doing a full review on this, and I still really recommend this. I found this funny. I really enjoyed some of the aspects of the reincarnation and talking about kind of having like an end goal, because the whole point of reincarnation is kind of to reach a nirvana type state, although they don't call it nirvana in here, and some of that. But this has a mix of good lives that Milo led, but also bad lives. So there's some times when like he's a bad person doing bad things. There's times when there's a part that he is accused of rape falsely that I didn't like in there, so if you're sensitive to that at all, definitely be aware of that before going into it, because I definitely felt like the book wasn't rectifying the fact that like rape accusations that are false are not actually the norm, and most rapes are underreported, and this isn't about like women ruining men's lives kind of like it's depicted in here, so that was not good. There's also a lot of like moments of torture and gore and some things like that I wasn't expecting. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those were the major things that I remember. So there's some like more disturbing things in here and parts that I just kind of had to glaze over a bit, but there's also really wonderful, beautiful parts of other lives. So I kind of liked that it was willing to go there, and that there was a mix of how lives would be if you're living all these different lives. Not all your lives are going to be great, and you're not necessarily always going to be a great person. There are ramifications for not being a good person and things like that. So I did enjoy that, but there are definitely some triggery type things in here that I wanted people to be aware of. But overall, enjoyed this book. Was very different in tone than a lot of things that I've read lately, and this was a book that I had to read because of a friend really enjoying it, and this was a book that was lent to me by Sam from Will Read for Booze, so she can finally get this book back after me having it for like over a year. But this was one that I wanted to definitely read based on a lot of the themes that it explored with death and the in-between and stuff like that. So 4 out of 5 stars for this one, and I'll be doing a full review on that coming up later this month. And the last book that I read in August, which gave me an E in herbology when I needed an O, so I didn't pass herbology either, was The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Arrow. And this was actually my Patreon book pick for the month, so every month, in addition to that whole VIP thing I talked about earlier, my Patreon supporters get to vote in polls, multiple different polls, but for this is a book that I will read and review off of my TBR, and this is what won for this month. So this is an adult standalone. I've heard some people talk about it as if it's YA. I do not believe it's YA. This is an adult imprint. The main character is 17 for the majority of the story, but this is definitely written in an adult way, so just be aware of that. And our main character, January, is sort of a ward of a wealthy man. She is somebody that she describes herself as an in-between person. She's living in the early 1900s, and she is a mixed race, but she's not really sure the story of her parents. Her father is around, but he works for the man that is sort of her foster father and isn't really around a lot. And at one point she comes in contact with a door, capital D, and discovers that there's places where you can go between worlds, and everything kind of goes from there. I'm also going to be doing a full review on this, so I don't want to get into this much in depth, but this is definitely very magical portal fantasy. I did expect there to be a little bit more of jumping between worlds, so I found that element a little bit disappointing. There's definitely worlds that they do jump into, but I was expecting more. I always want more worlds from portal fantasies. This is like the typical thing that happens. I love portal fantasies, but I just want so many more worlds. So that was kind of a thing. This is a family saga in a lot of ways. So I enjoyed that element, and it was unexpected. So it took me some time, even though that's something that I really love about stories, to actually kind of adapt to that being more of it than the adventure going through worlds type story that I was expecting it to be. So at the end I ended up really enjoying it, but it took me a little bit to get into it, and through a lot of the month of August I just kind of wasn't wanting to read that much. Towards the end of the month I had a lot going on. I was on call a lot for work and I just wasn't really motivated to read, and it wasn't really this book's fault, but I ended up reading this book for a lot longer than I thought I was going to. But I still really enjoyed and got attached to our characters. This is a nice wrapped up standalone. I can see it being a continuing series if she decides to add to it. I kind of hope she doesn't though, as I've talked about recently with authors adding on to stories. I kind of just want this to be a self-contained thing, but really grew to love the characters and felt for them. I actually ended up kind of tearing up at a point towards the end, so really enjoyed this one and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Speaking of Patreon book picks, I am doing something a little bit different moving forward. I'm starting a little bit of a book club. Now this is through Caravan, which I talked about earlier. Caravan is sponsoring this video, but they are helping to create a book club, which I think is a cool thing I was kind of thinking about doing before anyway. Caravan is an app that was created by some friends for making it easier to read books together and do buddy reads, because there's really not a great system for that. Goodreads has never been great for it. There's really hasn't been a solution for buddy reads that I've found in the years I've been on BookTube. So this was a really cool idea. So when they reached out to me and asked if I wanted to participate in any kind of book club, I thought that this was a really cool way to tie in the book club that I was hoping to start with my Patreon book picks every month, because every month my Patreon supporters get to pick a book and then I read it. But I was thinking it'd be really cool if you guys also wanted to jump in and read it with me and kind of do buddy reads each month if you were interested. So this connects to Discord and allows you to talk and text through the Discord app, mostly texting. I don't talk through Discord, but it's originally something that streamers used for gaming. So it is completely free. You can create your own book clubs and buddy reads if you want to. You can join mine. I will leave my link down below for that. Again, totally free. And September's book that my Patreon supporters have already voted on is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. So if you also want to read Gideon the Ninth next month, I again will leave a link down below and you can participate in the monthly book club, and that will be ongoing. So every month when my Patreon supporters get to vote in the poll for what book's gonna win, the winning book will be the book club book each month. So you guys can participate and read along with me if you're interested, and talk to each other and get to know each other, because it's all about community. I will leave additional information for Caravan down below as well if you're interested in creating your own buddy reads and things like that. So that is it for the books that I read in August. Like I said, I'm kind of sad that I didn't get through all of my NEWTS books, but it was sort of bound to happen. I actually looked back at some of my old reading spreadsheets from last year, and July and August are my 2 worst reading months last year. So it was actually pretty decent that I got 5 books read, so I'm not going to complain too much because I think last year I got 3 and in July I got 1. So I think the summer is just not a good reading time for me, but I can feel myself kind of revving up for fall, and a lot of books I've been subconsciously putting off for fall coming up now, so hopefully my reading will kind of take off again towards the end of the year. But comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and also how your reading month went. If you participated in the NEWTS, let me know how you did, since I did not do well. I did well on the Owls, sort of, not so much on the NEWTS. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.